Hello, welcome to Talking Rubbish, a weekly podcast delving deep into the world of recycling and discussing the truth behind snappy headlines and one-sided stories. In this episode, we will explore how to improve recycling from apartments. Are pens rubbish or not? And I have a question about what happens to the random rubbish in a skip. I'm James Piper, author of The Rubbish Book, and I'm joined by Robbie Staniforth, my far from rubbish friend. Morning, Robbie.
Hey, James.
You okay today?
Yeah, very good. Excited for another one in this new format.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so if listeners missed last week, I mean, would they have done that? Are there listeners that have listened to the first 45 episodes and then for some reason skipped episode 46?
Unlikely.
Okay, but if there are, we have a slightly new format. It's basically the same stuff. We've sort of dropped rubbish process and we've added in a couple of new features to make up for it. And I am proud this week. I think I've done 2 good investigations this week.
Okay, what, you've been out at the supermarket checkouts? Have you counting people's carrier bags again?
I have gone to one checkout.
Oh, okay.
But not counting people. But
okay.
This is a trail for the episode. Somewhere later in the episode, I will reveal my 2 investigations.
Oh, exciting.
But first, in this world of new format, let's head over to a trash talk. Trash talk. Yeah, we've wanted to talk about flat recycling, particularly since episode 38, I think, where we explained that Tower Hamlets had a recycling rate of 15.8%, which was significantly lower than the average of 44%.
Yeah, and I'm sure there was plenty of people there saying, it's not my fault, it's really hard to recycle here.
Yeah, I mean, London as a whole has a recycling rate of 28.8%, I think we said, which was the lowest region in the country.
Yeah.
And I had a quick look, and actually 54% of households in London are flats. Yeah, and that's compared to 17%, which is the national average. And
I imagine even those that aren't flats are probably like houses that are small dwellings where you can't easily put bins out the back, no side alley, etc., etc.
Exactly, yeah. And flat recycling rates actually can be as low as 10%. So they really drag down the national average. And as with everything, when we're dealing with averages, the best thing to do is to focus on the big wins. And for me, flat recycling is the biggest win. There's no point saying to South Oxfordshire, oh, how do we get from, 65% or whatever they were up to 66%? You're much better off going to the flats that are at 10% and saying, how do we get you up to, 30, 40%? Because that
it needs a big focus, doesn't it?
Absolutely, particularly if over 50% of households in London are flats. And we actually had a listener write in with quite a lot of detail about their situation. So I just wanted to read kind of a summary of this email to kick us off. So her council had moved from wheelie bins to large bins in her flat complex.
Okay, so they just changed the size of the wheelie bin from one of those 180 litre ones to...
Yeah, to those massive ones on wheels.
Massive 1,100, whatever.
Exactly, yes. And the contractor for the council, because one of the things we have with flats is often it'll be the council doing collections. It could also be a private company. Sometimes you might have a Biffa or Veolia bin. So depends on how your council's set up. But in this particular case, our listener was saying that the contract for the council regularly refused the collection as it was too contaminated.
Okay, it wasn't recycling inside that big bin.
Yeah, they would. Obviously, there were people just mixing stuff up. Now, this compounded the issue because the waste was building up and the council was then demanding, or the contractor was then demanding additional fees over and above the council tax to take it.
To the tenants. The tenants had to pay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the tenants had to pay for the few mischievous ones who didn't know how to do their recycling.
She did actually email me yesterday to say that they were budgeting something like £500 a month, the apartment block.
Whoa.
For the extra collections. So this is not an insignificant amount of money. This is a lot of money.
And is she sort of saying that changing from multiple of those 240 litre bins to just one very big 1,100 litre bin means that everything spoils and they can't even take out a couple of the wheelie bins where... people haven't got it wrong. Is that what she's trying to say or not?
I think what she's saying is most people in their apartment block are diligent recyclers doing the correct thing. And there are some people in the apartment block who don't care.
Okay.
And unfortunately what's happening is the diligent recyclers are having to pick up their share of the bill for the people who don't care. And I think this is a good summary to start us off of why flat recycling can be such a nightmare. Like when I put my recycling out from my house, everyone can see it's mine. It's on my curbside next to my house. Everyone knows it's me. So I have this sense of like ownership that what I'm putting out is kind of a representation of me, I guess.
Sure.
And when you're in a flat, and I used to live in a flat, so I experienced this. I spent many years in flats. You know, there is that, you don't have that same sense of like, oh, this is my bin, this is my ownership. And there will be some people who don't care about recycling, don't care about getting it right, who maybe just realise that no one knows it's them.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So they take that approach, and then unfortunately that leads to everyone else having to pick up a huge bill. So I guess this email is a good reminder for us that if this goes wrong, particularly in that communal setting, if flat recycling goes wrong, then it can be very expensive.
Yeah, no, it sounds it. And it's that old adage, isn't it? A shared responsibility is no one's responsibility.
Very nice. It's early in the morning to get some adages in. So what do we want to do? We want to be positive today, not negative. So let's not just talk about kind of all the potential issues. What we want to talk about is how you maybe could make it better. And we are fortunate enough to know and have worked in the past with an organisation called London, and they are the experts in flat recycling.
Yeah, no, London, it's like a partnership between the Mayor of London and the London boroughs, specifically to improve waste and resource management in the nation's capital. And so they are absolutely experts in recycling. They're sort of dedicated to these kinds of issues. So we're going to summarise some of their work. And there's also a link to EcoSurety, the podcast sponsor, because they funded some of this work. They launched a fund a few years ago, and one of the projects that was picked deliberately, because this is a difficult, nuggety issue, was London, who wanted to explore and run a report basically to say, what are we actually going to do about this? Everybody knows about all of the problems, but let's have a look at some of the solutions.
Yeah, and it's just worth saying the reports are excellent. So we're just going to do a little summary here. But if you want to read them, I'll put them in our link tree. And I would definitely... They're digestible, super easy to read, and really, really interesting. And they've got lots of visuals, lots of pictures, symbols, signs, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to have a read of the report, do that. For me, the thing that stood out is basically in their latest toolkit to flats, they put out 10 recommendations. And I thought it would be worth us just going through those 10 recommendations, just giving our thoughts on them. At one point, I did turn to Ellie yesterday and say, is this really bad if I just take a company's report and just read it out? And then I thought, well, because we co-funded it, I don't feel too bad. And we'll put our own thoughts into it, won't we, Robbie? But, I can't stress enough how much we're thanking London for doing all this work. It really made our lives easy this week.
Yeah, no, very happy to amplify their hard work.
So they split it into two. They had operational and communication. So the first 6 recommendations are operational. They're things that councils would physically have to change to improve the system. And the final 4 are communication-based. So let's just talk about these operational ones. The first one, which we don't have to labour a point too much on because we have talked about it so many times on this podcast, is about collecting the 6 main dry recyclable materials and food.
Yeah.
So 6 main materials: paper, cardboard, glass, cans, plastic bottles, and rigid plastics. So those are your dry recyclables, and food waste. And we know how important collecting food is in order to increase recycling.
So they're just saying make it universal, give them all of the options that are available, because otherwise people will say, why can't I recycle plastic bottles here or mix rigid plastics? When I moved from a flat in another borough, I was able to recycle it, and people will lose faith in the system. As we know, simpler recycling has come in for businesses earlier this year, and that standardizes those material streams across businesses, and the same will happen next year in 2026. So this will become mandated now. So their recommendation here, luckily, is going to be followed up by a law.
Yeah, and that 2026, which is households, presumably that includes flats and houses of multiple occupation. It's not just semi-detached.
No, exactly. Yeah,
houses.
all dwellings, basically, all homes.
So that's their first recommendation, just collect a wide range of materials. The next one was the co-location of rubbish, dry recycling and food bins. So what they're basically saying here is you need to give residents equal access to each stream. What you don't want is like your rubbish bin near the door and your recycling bin, 10 metres away or something.
Miles away, round the corner, tucked away, behind a locked gate.
Exactly. They want that to be equal. Now, interestingly, in their report, they said it would be best to have dry recycling and food waste as close to the main entrance and exit as possible. I didn't really agree with that. And I did go back to them to say, are you sure? Because that's going to increase contamination. People are...
They're just going to pick the first bin, aren't they?
Yeah, I wish people weren't lazy. But some people are lazy and some people will just go, oh, look, that's the bin next to the door. I'll put my rubbish in that. And they won't really think about it. Now, the next point covers why they felt this was okay. So I'll save that for the next point. But they did come back to me and say, look, actually, we think that's still the best advice, that you would have the dry recycling and food waste as close to the main entrance as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hope. I assume that this is very well researched. I'm not absolutely certain it makes logical sense. I would have thought they would just need to be laid out in an ideal world right next to one another on equal footing, so to speak, so that you could choose the right bin.
Yeah, and that is their general theme.
Yeah,
keep everything close to each other. Now, the reason they felt that actually it wouldn't increase contamination is the next point is appropriate dry recycling and food bins. Now, what they're saying there is that actually apertures are really important.
Okay, so what, the size of the slot that the thing goes into?
Exactly. Now, we've talked about this before, maybe not as much as we should have done, but apertures on bins really do help reduce contamination.
Yeah, love a can-sized aperture. So satisfying, isn't it? Pop a can in one of those round slots.
Yes, exactly. So aperture's really important in reducing contamination. So we're just talking about the opening in the bin. So if you have a lid that has a hole for a can, or you have a lid for paper that is shaped like paper, it helps people. So for example, if you're putting a cardboard bin with a letterbox aperture, it's going to cause people to flatten their cardboard, right?
Oh, making them do an extra step and get more volume in the bin. It's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, or unfortunately they might just go, I can't be bothered to flatten this, so I'll put my unflattened stuff in general. But, that's the downside to the aperture. But
or
it does.
Probably on top of the bin, and then the next person who comes along, who is a very conscientious recycler, then flattens it for them. I bet you a lot of that happens.
I suspect our listener who wrote in would be flattening that cardboard.
Absolutely.
Yes. They also feel it's important to have reusable bags for people to store their dry recyclables. So particularly in flats, you need to have this kind of what's your storage in the flat? And in houses, we sort of take responsibility for that, don't we? We go, okay, I need some recycling bins, so I'll go to IKEA or whatever and buy some bins.
Yeah.
With flats, it's a bit different because you need something that's transporting it from your flat to the bin. So typically councils will take a bit more responsibility in terms of providing the right bags for you to have within your house as well as at the bin level.
So I'm thinking those sort of plastic woven bags that you can wipe clean with a handle on them. Are we thinking that kind of thing?
Exactly that kind of thing. And they actually found, and I can absolutely believe this, that if you're collecting food waste, for example, giving out free liners for your food waste caddy in your flat is the strongest factor in terms of how satisfied residents are with the service.
Wow.
So if you want residents to be like, oh, they're doing a great job, you just give them free liners to put their food waste in.
Honestly, a caddy liner does really make your life so much easier, I find, with food waste. I'm a conscientious recycler, and I'm not sure if I didn't have caddy liners if I would be doing it to the same extent. It just makes it so much easier, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And obviously, for me, the move for companies like Co-op, who now issue carrier bags as caddy liners, I think these are the good moves that make life a lot simpler for people.
Yeah, and interestingly, it is a primary function is as a caddy liner. It just so happens that it also transports your shopping home. It's amazing
exactly.
that, it's primarily a caddy liner, not a shopping bag. It's really turning things on its head.
It's great. Now, the fourth thing is adequate collections to prevent overflows. Now, this is all about bin volume, basically, and having enough collections. So they recommended with dry recycling a minimum of 60 litres per household per week. Now, if you remember, when we talked about Bristol going to 4 weekly in episode 29, the issue we had with that was that we have 180 litre bins. So it would mean 45 litres per week. And we didn't feel that was enough. And so 60 litres per household per week is a fairly standard average. So like in cities in Wales where they've gone to 4 weekly bin collections, they have 240 litre bins because they've calculated that it needs to be 60 litres per household per week of recycling collections, and it will be the same. So sorry, that's what they recommended with dry recycling, but it's also the same as general, which is what I'm referring to when I talk about Bristol. With food, they recommend 10 litres per household per week. So again, it's just quite interesting that they are putting a mathematical formula around this. So they're saying, this is what the average household needs, this is what you should provide in the flat, and then you just check that your collections and your bins make up that requirement.
So I'm just doing the quick maths behind our listener who wrote in and said that they had moved to those 1,100 litre bins. So that divided by 60 for the dry recycling, 60 litres per household per week, means that just over 18 flats, 18.3 flats would be covered by just one of those bins. So it shows you just how big the recycling point or recycling area, the demarcated space for flats would need to be if one of those, and I think people will recognise those big commercial bins that you often see outside pubs and nightclubs and restaurants in city centres, you would need one of those every week. Would only cover 18 flats.
So the fifth thing they recommended is clean and well-maintained bins and bin areas. People need to feel pride in that bin area. You need to keep it clean. So they talk about it needing to be well lit, doing a weekly clean of the bins, and bulky waste cleared regularly.
Oh, yeah, that fly tipping is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, they talked a lot about bulky waste, about putting up posters that have kind of phone numbers on to say, look, can you organise your bulky waste through this rather than leaving it here? That is a big problem in flats.
It's huge because also car ownership too. It's not only I don't have somewhere to put it, it's I don't have a way to transport it to somewhere that I would put it. So it really is it's a much bigger problem than where people have got households and got cars that they might be able to put bulky items on their roof or in their boot and take it to their local civic amenity site.
Absolutely. And the final operational one was regular monitoring of the sites. And one of their key recommendations here was someone monitoring it who is not the collection crew, because the collection crew ultimately, it's they'd be marking their own homework. They'd be saying, oh yeah, it's all fine, I did a great job.
But they're also done on time. Their KPIs are on time and number of lifts and stuff. There isn't many KPIs on cleanliness, is there? They really just are being sweat as an asset, so to speak, because of council budgets being cut, etc., etc. The time to look over a site is very limited.
Absolutely. So just to summarise those operational ones, because there were 6 there. So you've got the collection of the main materials, including food waste. You've got co-location of the bins, so making sure they're near each other, the appropriate bins, adequate collections, clean areas, and regular monitoring. I mean, this is all, I'm sure there'll be people sat going, this is such common sense. But I tell you what, if it was common sense, we would have recycling rates above 10% in flats.
Yeah, no, it's totally true.
Someone actually has to write this down and say, can you all just do this, please? And then that dramatically increases recycling rates.
Well, building developers also need to get hold of this report, don't they? Because they're the ones who are going to need to create the environment where this can thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's come on to communication. So there were 4 communication recommendations. So there was clear and visible signage on the rubbish, the dry recycling, food bins and bin storage areas. The thing I found most interesting here is they were saying actually the stickers should be replaced yearly.
Okay.
And from my time in flats, they were never replaced. You ended up with stickers peeling off, half off.
Yeah, and you had to remember what that bin was from when the sticker was once on it. I remember that from living in a flat.
Exactly. And someone moves in and they're like, oh, I haven't quite got used to this system yet. So it's just one of those things, isn't it, where it's definitely worth keeping those, your communications up to date and making sure that everyone understands so that as people move in and out, it's clear what they need to do. they felt it was quite important if you're working through this toolkit, you're doing these 10 recommendations, one of the most important things to do is actually relaunch the service.
Okay.
And so they had a lot of posters of like, it's time for a fresh start. You know, it's a moment of change. It's something we're doing that's different. Because actually that just galvanizes people to go, okay, this is new. I'm going to put some extra effort in. And they mentioned specifically with food waste that the best thing to do is to focus on the kind of personal aspect. So no more stinky kitchen bins, and you won't have pests anymore if you do this correctly, and all that kind of stuff. So to make it a bit more personal for the residents.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about this before, haven't we? How once you move to food waste with a sealed bin where all the food is separate from everything else, it then feels weird to throw food waste in with all your general dust from the vacuum cleaner and other unrecyclable rubbish. I'm sure that kind of social norming, as they call it, would definitely help with getting people into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they felt that so the third thing around communications was keeping them ongoing. So yearly recycling leaflets, posters in communal areas. We know this works. I once did a project with Every Can Counts where we wrote to all the Bristol residents to say, oh, by the way, you can recycle these kinds of metal. You know, and we focused on things like aerosol cans that people tend to forget about.
Sure.
And we increased recycling rates. I think the month after that letter went out, I think our recycling rates of metal increased by 40%, something like that.
Wow. Okay, so it had a tangible impact immediately after that flyer, because people are suddenly like, oh, I didn't realise that.
Yeah, you just remind people. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I had this idea with batteries that actually you could kind of do this kind of annual battery amnesty if you were doing collections. So rather than doing a weekly battery collection, actually, if you just did one day a year, it was like empty your drawers, put your batteries out. That might be more powerful, because that's how we all store batteries in our house. We just chuck them in a drawer, and actually sending out a bag and a communication to say, you know, next week's the day.
Now's the time. Yeah.
Might be more effective. So regular communication and thinking outside the box is super important with this stuff. And as I said earlier, the final one was informing residents what to do with bulky waste items. So having no dumping signs, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff.
So there's a couple of things I suppose I'm surprised not to see. So one is like some sort of CCTV based thing. We're watching you or whatever, which I don't personally like, but I wondered if that would be part of their, you know, comms strategy, is to kind of say, look, do the right thing because somebody's watching, although I don't particularly like that tactic. And the other thing was language barriers and stuff. You know, people moving in, English not as their first language. How do they understand a recycling system if they only have a small amount of English? I presume maybe within the recommendations they talk about the clear and visible signage, James.
Yeah, there's a lot in the reports about using pictures as well as words, which will cover that latter point. The CCTV point, I think they tended to focus on the positive rather than the, you know, punitive, we're watching you, or
big brother,
you know, penalty-based measures. It was much more on the kind of how do we get people encouraged to recycle.
Yeah, no, and definitely that phone number for the bulky waste is much better than just saying, don't dump your stuff here, you might get fined.
Yeah. So, Robbie, my question for you is, when you lived in a flat, did you get any cool bulky waste? Did you find anything that you thought, that's hilarious, I can't believe someone's tried to dump that?
Bulky waste? No, I can't think. I mean, just the classics, like so many mattresses, many sofas, like almost weekly. And you sort of look around and think, there's not enough flats in this block to generate this many sofas and mattresses.
Yeah. I remember once when I lived in a flat, I went down to our bin area and someone had thrown away a suitcase. And it was a really nice suitcase. And I just thought, well, I'm going to have that. Like, I can clean that out. And it was just the zip was broken, so I fixed the zip. But I must admit, the fear the first time I took that on holiday, thinking, I really hope this person wasn't a coke addict.
How nervous were you opening the...
I was so nervous that there was like some drug residue in this suitcase. Did you pack this yourself? Yeah? Is it your suitcase? Sort of.
Well done for being brave. You obviously got away with it.
I did. Well, yeah, except for those few years in prison. So what does this actually achieve, this work? Well, London actually wrote a report in 2022 where they worked across 4 estates. Now, these were big estates. I think between them, the 4 estates had 477 households.
Wow.
So these were some big, flat blocks in London. They rolled out these 10 interventions and they had an average increase in recycling of 152%.
That's crazy. Okay, so those 477 households needed 26 of those big bins.
Yes.
That's a big old area.
Yeah, absolutely. So it does sound amazing, 152%. I mean, I guess the reality check on this is the baseline. They started at 11% recycling rate and they increased to 27%.
Whoa, that's good.
It's a big increase, but of course it's still way below the national average.
Yeah, fair.
Now, a lot of this they put down to food waste. They said, look, by adding food waste, because they picked flats that didn't have food waste.
Okay,
so by adding food waste, they drove the recycling rate. And they actually had a drop in the residual bin of 45% on food waste.
Okay, wow, that is so helpful. Surely for the costs to councils too, it will be cheaper, won't it, not having to burn or landfill all of that waste?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I forwarded this report on to our emailer to say, what do you think? What's, do you agree with this report? What's your council not doing? Why is it costing you £500 a month extra? And she said, actually, she felt the report was spot on. And the key thing that her council could do out of the back of this kind of work is she felt the council should take waste even if there's contamination. So
okay.
She felt, well, actually, first of all, improve the education, improve the signage, and if there is contamination, still take the waste, because ultimately that's what you do at a household. I think councils typically will take a wheelie bin that's got contamination from our house. Yeah. And the fact that they're not taking it from the flats is kind of, her view is that's quite discriminatory. That's not working for them. So a lot of what she felt was relevant in the report was the education piece and helping the rest of the flat really understand where they're going wrong. So I'm conscious we've gone through those 10 things. We've hopefully that's been useful. I guess just to summarise, there is no point, in my opinion, spending loads of money getting councils that have like a 62.9% recycling rate, so like South Oxfordshire, up to 65%, for example, without first tackling the areas that have super low recycling rates, like London, which is at 28.8%. So we should go for this kind of low-hanging fruit of how do we get a flat that's got 10% recycling up to 30, 40%, because that will make a way bigger difference. And I did a quick calculation. If 54% of London is flats and we improved it to the standard of those 4 estates that London had worked on,
oh yeah,
it would increase the London recycling rate from 28.8% up to 37.5%.
Wow, okay, so a big jump across the whole city.
Yeah, still lower than the average 44% for the country, so it shows how much work there is to do. But they would no longer be the lowest recycling rate in the country. They would be the second lowest. So
okay, they'd move a ranking.
What aspirations. But yes, I mean, going up from 28.8% to 37.5% would have a significant impact on the country's recycling average. So I definitely think this stuff's worth investing in. And I guess the biggest summary is, in theory, this stuff pays for itself. Yes, there's the cost of new bins. Yes, there's the cost of cleaning and education. But the reduction in contamination and increase in recycling should increase the value of the material, which should cover the costs. And in my opinion, investing in flat recycling is a true win-win. Additions and corrections. Robbie, it has kicked off.
It really has.
It has kicked off. And I knew it as well. I knew when we started this podcast, we would inevitably spend all our time talking about dog poo and toilet rolls. I just knew it. So we got our petition about dog poo. I'll talk about that in a sec. But toilet rolls, that has become the thing.
Yeah, no, it's like this dormant issue in people's households.
Yeah, absolutely. So following episode 42, where we discuss couples fighting about recycling and specifically mentioned me leaving toilet rolls on the loo seat.
Yeah.
We had a friend of the podcast, Luciana, posting on LinkedIn. She posted a very kind review of our podcast, so thank you so much for that. And a picture of her toilet cistern, which had 9 empty toilet rolls on it.
She was going for a record, wasn't she?
Ellie, it could be so much worse. Imagine 9. I did actually respond to say I felt she could get another 10 on there, and she has messaged me to say she's taken on the challenge. So I'm expecting a picture any day now with 20 toilet rolls on the cistern.
That's a much bigger cistern than mine. I don't think it would cope with that many.
No. Oh, Robbie, come on. I think you should take on this challenge too. Don't be defeatist. Now, this then led Connor, another friend of the podcast, Connor, who I think we talked about, I don't know, maybe like episode 7, who collected up his friends' carrier bags and gave them out in a supermarket.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
This led Connor to share how he puts toilet rolls into one toilet roll. So he sort of scrunches up the toilet roll and pushes it into one.
Oh, yeah. A couple of folds, push it into the middle. Yeah, I know the thing.
And there were some that had like 4 in one roll. And initially I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe this is the solution.
But space saving seems.
Exactly. But then that led to Will Connolly, who we've had on the podcast, and Roger from Biffa commenting, saying, hey, that's going to make it not get recycled because MRFs are expecting paper to look like paper. And if you brick paper, as in you put loads of paper together to make it much heavier, it is likely to get sorted as a plastic, not paper.
Oh, it'll seem like a sort of 3D object or something, like a piece of plastic and not flattened cardboard.
Exactly. Don't break up your cardboard, guys. Don't squash it all together with loads of other cardboard.
They were also saying you should take some scissors to it and actually flatten out a toilet roll if you really wanted to go the extra mile.
Were they? I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think so. Flatten it out. It was either squash it, maybe I'm making up the scissors bit. It was either squash it so it's flat or scissors and open it out so it's also flat.
So then there was this whole discussion about toilet rolls, and we were all having a good laugh about it.
What's your favourite brand?
Exactly. Then I was in Tesco 2 days ago, and Cushell, that's how you say it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and Cushell have started selling a tubeless roll.
Lovely. The Holy Grail, isn't it?
Literally what I wrote. Which then has led to a really interesting discussion about whether unbleached recycled paper, which is what Connor was using, is better than bleached tubeless paper.
Oh my God.
And I am going to save that for the toilet roll trash talk.
Okay, geez, we're going down that wormhole.
Yeah, but it just goes to show how this podcast can cause people to descend into madness. I think I spent 2 hours talking about toilet roll this week.
So I had a correction this week. Oh, I had a very disgruntled friend on the phone.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
They never ring me. They just.
This was a telephone call.
This
was a telephone call, talking about us mixing our metals. I think episode 44, you talked about putting staples in a steel can. Very sensible thing to do if you wanted to be a really conscientious recycler. You also said you can just leave it in the paper. But if you wanted to be conscientious, put it in a steel can. But then you said to seal it off with some aluminium foil.
I did have a look at the transcript. I'm not sure I actually ever said aluminium.
Oh, did you? What did you say?
I just said
foil.
You could seal it off with a bit of foil. Now, obviously, I know all foil is aluminium, but just to clarify for the critics, I never, ever suggested mixing metals.
That well-known steel foil that you can is readily available is what you should be sealing with. But actually, it's not as bad, because if that gets sorted as steel, the aluminium foil will just burn off in the process of making new steel. So that's not too bad. However, similarly disgruntled about what I said in one of the very early episodes of the podcast, so early that I couldn't even find it, to be honest, is that I said you should stick steel caps, on the top of like beer bottles or whatever, inside aluminium foil to help make it a tennis ball size. And this is a problem, because those steel caps, like on top of your beer or whatever, they will spoil the aluminium recycling. So I think what happened there was I misspoke. I was meaning to say the aluminium caps that you get on top of wine bottles quite commonly, if it's not a cork, those can obviously go together with aluminium. But if it's an obviously steel cap, you shouldn't be putting it inside your tennis ball size aluminium foil that people are trying to make. Or alternatively, if it's a wine bottle cap, you can pop it back on and they'll get sorted out in the process. So there we go. Don't mix your metals, folks.
As always, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, EcoSurety, who are on a mission to rid the world of unnecessary packaging. They help brands navigate the tricky world of extended producer responsibility, but that is not all. They also collaborate on some incredible recycling projects and consumer awareness campaigns for those tough-to-recycle materials. If you're an organisation looking to make smarter packaging choices, check them out at ecosurety.com. And as a reminder, we have a petition live, our first Talking Rubbish petition.
Very exciting.
I continue to have so many ideas for petitions we're going to do if this one goes well.
That's going to become us, is it? Petition heavy.
Oh, yeah. I'm delighted to say that we're supported by Keep Britain Tidy as well, which is a very recognisable name, helping us with our petition, and Pet Impact, who are one of the companies who make dog poo bags out of recycled bags, who want to communicate that compostable and biodegradable is not all it's shaped up to be. So yeah, as we said last week when we introduced it, we are very keen for people who make dog poo bags to not use the word compostable and biodegradable, because it will never be sent for composting. So it's just a misleading claim. It's a bit of greenwashing, which we quite like to see disappear. We're very happy for those companies to continue to use compostable plastic if they want to. We just don't think they should suggest to the public that it can be composted, because it just can't, and we think it encourages people to litter. So if you agree with that and you want compostable to be reserved for things that can be composted, then go ahead and sign our petition. I'll include a link in the show notes. Remember, you can follow us on social media at Rubbish Podcast. You can email talkingrubbishpodcast@gmail.com, or you can WhatsApp us. And please join our Discord. It's the easiest way to engage with us and listeners of the show. And the link to all of that is in our show notes. One of the things you can do to help us grow the most is leave us a review. And Robbie, do you have a review of the week?
Oh, yes. I've got one here from Vegan Bex. Loving this podcast. Discovered it a few weeks ago, then went back and started from the beginning. I'm now up to date and have to wait patiently for the next episode. I've learned so much. Thank you. So there we go. Look, that's a ringing endorsement that those old episodes are standing the test of time, James. Go back and listen to them.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Vegan Bex. Rubbish or not. So, Robbie, I promised at the start that I did some investigative journalism this week.
Oh, here it comes, is it?
This one is my first, yeah. So I think this is our most popular request for Rubbish or Not. So thank you to Emily, Sarah and Sam on Discord and Elaine on WhatsApp. We're answering four of your requests in one go. That's our most popular. So the request was pens. Are pens rubbish or not? What do you reckon, Robbie?
I say rubbish.
Rubbish, yeah.
Mix of so many different materials, isn't it? The plastic casing, the metal nib, sometimes a spring, ink.
Pretty mixed.
Yeah,
I agree with you. And even if you break down all those components, by the time you've broken them down, it's too small. So it's not, remember what we talked about in the RAM, 4 centimetres in 2 dimensions. You're never going to get that with any part of a pen. So...
And that's the sum total of your research, is it, James?
No, here we go. Now, I have to apologise to BIC here, because we're going to go... Ooh. They're the people I spent most of my time looking at. Now, I think they're doing better than most, to be honest, so I'm not picking on BIC.
We would still take BIC as a sponsor if they want to come in.
Yeah,
is that what
absolutely. We don't pick on BIC. That's our episode title sorted. I went looking at BIC because they're the biggest pen manufacturer in the world, and they have the best-selling pen in the world, the Bic Ballpoint, created in 1950. They've sold a huge quantity. I think by September 2006, so 20 years ago, they'd sold 100 billion. So I don't have any more up-to-date data than that, but...
Always on the finger on the pulse, James.
Maybe they're at 200 billion now? I don't know. So I am sorry for picking on them, but I found quite interesting that they had a sustainability page on their website, and I love looking through a company's sustainability page, as you know, Robbie. And they use the classic quotes like sustainability is a cornerstone of our business, which you just think you're making a thing that's pretty difficult to recycle. It's like a disposable vape company. You know, you've got to manually dismantle this stuff. It can't really be recycled. Is sustainability really a cornerstone of your business? You know, you're making a product that's pretty tough. Now, what made me feel this the most is they have a timeline on their website on a sustainability page, which said in 2011 they started a partnership in Europe with TerraCycle to collect back pens.
Okay, yep.
So I did what every good investigative journalist did, and I went through every European TerraCycle website to find out which ones had a BIC programme active. And the only country that mentioned a BIC programme was France.
Okay, so they started it in Europe, not across Europe.
Well, they had it. I'll come on to the UK in a second. But yes, France does currently have a BIC collection programme. They're not actually taking on any more kind of bin collection points, but they do have 539 drop-off points around France. So if you're listening to us from France, and we do have lots of listeners in France, you can recycle a pen. Everyone else, it's a bit more difficult. Just as a side note, from looking at those TerraCycle websites, I think Germany did have a scheme with Pilot, which is another pen manufacturer. So,
yes. Yep.
So there may be other alternatives. And I know we need to talk more about TerraCycle. We get lots of people writing in about them. It's on my list as a trash talk. But what I wanted to do was understand why BIC continued to have on their UK website, we have a partnership with TerraCycle, when they clearly don't. So I went into Ryman's yesterday, which is a stationer in the UK that I knew used to have these points.
Okay.
And I went up and said, I've got loads of pens to recycle. Do you have a collection point? What can I do with them? And the guy in the shop, he started by saying, we used to have a partnership with a company called Terraform. So it was not a great start, if I'm honest.
Didn't quite get the name right. It was nearly there, though.
Nearly there, halfway. And he said, look, we stopped that programme in December 2024. He did mention that it was funded by BIC before the finances stopped. And he'd been told by the organisation that it was coming back in January, February, but he hadn't heard anything. And obviously it's now June. So I must admit, from him, I got this vibe that look, it wasn't coming back. And I guess this is my frustration with it. It's like you have a website that says sustainability is a cornerstone of our business, and then you scrap the one thing that allowed you to collect back your pens. And, it annoys me when people have timelines on their website that say things like, in 2011, we launched a recycling program across Europe. They slowly switch that off and they don't put in their timeline, and we stopped it. Now, yeah. I understand why companies don't do that, but it's always been a frustration of mine that you create this kind of narrative that you care a lot, but then you don't follow through with that when it starts costing lots of money. That doesn't mean I'm a massive fan of TerraCycle. We'll talk about them separately. It's just an observation. Interestingly, BIC did have an impact report on their website. I really do feel like I'm picking on them, I'm sorry. But their impact report was actually really, really good. And they had in there that the plastic packaging around their pens had reached 85%. Now, this bit was meaningless. Had reached 85% reusable, recyclable or compostable. The packaging,
So just recyclable.
It's cardboard and a bit of plastic, right? The good stuff that I found in their impact report was they are now mostly PVC free, then 99% free of PVC, so just 1% of the product contains PVC. Their plastic packaging has 65% recycled content, which I thought was really good.
That is good, yeah.
In the impact report, they said 16% of their raw materials were metal in 2024. Now, I was quite surprised. 16% of what they were buying was metal. I would have thought most of it was plastic.
It's a very small nib, yeah.
And of that metal, 31% had recycled content. And again, I was like, quick win, get that up to 100%. That should be really easy.
Yeah.
So anyway, we could spend ages talking about pens. We could go into inks.
This is the longest rubbish or not we've ever had, isn't it?
I know. I told you I did all this research and I didn't want to miss it. It has made me feel we should do a deep dive into pens. So maybe we'll just pause there. We'll do a trash talk because there's loads of interesting stuff once you get into it.
Yeah, let's not write that off. It's a great idea.
Very good. That's what people are coming for. That's the content. Pause there for the listeners just to give you a little round of applause. Unless you're driving, don't do that. But a little round of applause. Lovely. One of the things that I found really interesting is in their impact report, they kept putting up pictures of the pen. And it all had that little clip. You know that little clip that when you put it in your pocket, you have that bit that sticks out?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I kept thinking, why do we still make that?
You don't need that.
Does anyone actually use that? That's a bit of plastic that's pointless, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true, actually. Yeah, maybe they could reduce.
Get rid of the clip. Should that be petition 2 after dog poo bags?
Clip the clip.
Robbie, you are on fire. Absolutely on fire today. Okay, so just to wrap, we have to wrap pens up. This has been like 10 minutes on pens. It's reflective of the fact that 4 people have written in about it. But just to wrap this up, TerraCycle do sell zero waste bags. A small one costs £25 and it would hold 90 pens. So if you wanted to do this at home, you could go onto their website and buy a small waste or medium or large, whatever you wanted, a zero waste bag, and that is a route to recycling if you really, really want to recycle your pens. The reason they are hard to recycle is because you've got to manually dismantle them. Whenever you've got to manually dismantle something, you've got to pay a load of money to get it collected and recycled. Rubbish news. So this is our new section for listen. Obviously, people will have heard this last week, but if you haven't or you've just forgotten we're doing this, we want to talk about a news story each week that we found interesting. And for me, there is one news story that has dominated over the last few weeks, which is the disposable vape ban that came in on the 1st of June.
Yes, finally the date has come.
Yes, we talked about this like back in episode 17, I think, Robbie.
Yeah, long time ago.
Long time ago. And I guess the best thing about the vape ban was it created stories that really show what we're up against when we talk about recycling. It brought out the absolute worst in humanity, in my opinion.
Okay.
It was crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Really? I missed that.
Okay, here's a headline of a BBC article on the 24th of May. I don't know what we'll do. Vapers panic buy ahead of disposable ban.
Oh, my God.
I'll tell you what you do. You'll buy a rechargeable one.
That looks almost exactly the same.
Makes no difference. You just recharge it. Here's a quote from Cara, who I'm sure is not listening to this podcast, but if she is, I apologise. With everything else going on in my life, what if I forget to recharge my vape and then I wake up one morning without a vape, or I run out of charge at work? I'm used to the ease of being able to buy a disposable one when I need. Gosh, it's amazing we survive with phones, isn't it? Do you think every day she's buying a brand new disposable phone? I forgot to charge it.
I'm used to buying one of these £1,000 phones whenever I like.
Oh my God, we are being unfair to Cara, I'm sorry. But my goodness, I was like, this is awful. And then we had Baroness Claire Fox saying the rechargeables have a metallic battery taste, which I don't like. I don't.
And that's true, is it? That's scientifically proven. We've had that confirmed.
What are you doing? What? How would the vape liquid, which is in a self-contained container, I mean, I don't know how vapes work, but there's no way that liquid is going through the rechargeable battery to get to your mouth. You're a baroness. Come on. You can think about how life works.
Do some research. Oh, this is great. I'm enjoying this.
Now, interestingly, 16% of people in this article said that they would stop vaping after the ban. Hey.
Lovely.
That's great. That is great.
And take up smoking, then?
Yeah.
They didn't clarify that.
Look, I think this is all a bit of a red herring. I'm a massive fan of this ban. I am not a fan of what is happening next, which is, look, the rechargeable vapes, we all know, are basically exactly the same as the single-use ones. They just chucked a charging point at the bottom of them. And they actually had an interview with a retailer who said they were selling rechargeable vapes at the same price point as the disposable ones, just making less margin. So it just goes to show when you create this legislation, you've got to cover loopholes. You know, for example, put a minimum price in so that people can't just go, oh, let's change it to the price of a disposable vape.
God, how dodgy are these new vapes coming onto the market, do we think, fire-wise?
We're going to talk, fires. I mean, particularly with people stockpiling them. I shudder to think how many vapes Cara has in her house now. And
oh, no.
You're creating a fire risk. It is not worth it. It is not worth it. So we will report again on vapes, I'm sure, in the future as things come out. And we'll have a look at these stats when we understand what impact the rechargeable vapes are having and whether people are just throwing them away. But please, if you vape and you're throwing them away, make sure you dispose of them correctly. Look for a dedicated bin. They are electricals. They should not go in your normal household bin. Robbie, do you have any news that's annoyed you?
I'm not sure whether I'm annoyed about this or not, actually. Yet to form an opinion. But I saw in the news this last week that companies, I should say, are leaving the US Plastics Pact.
Oh, yes.
So Plastics Pacts, for people who are unaware, there's loads of them around the world where brands and retailers sign up to make commitments to improve their use of plastic, basically. But some major companies have left the US version of this pact. L'Oreal, Mars, Mondelez, Nestle, Walmart. But they're all sort of quietly quitting. You know, they're just saying we're quitting, but they're not coming out with a big public statement around the exact reasons why they're not continuing with the pact. The original ones, all the commitments that were made, which were things like eliminate unnecessary packaging, put more recycled content into their products and their packaging, make it recyclable so that it can actually be recycled, and then finally make sure it is actually recycled or composted in some versions. It all came to an end in 2025. They're trying to extend those commitments to 2030, but lots of these brands are basically saying, we're shooting for pretty much the same target across most of those commitments that they haven't made by 2025. They clearly can't really see a pathway to doing it by 2030, in my view. So therefore, they're not continuing. So hard to know the exact reasons, but it seems like these voluntary frameworks are only getting us so far. And if there's probably a trend that we've seen towards more action-orientated programs such as collection schemes, etc., rather than these accusations that the pacts can sometimes be a bit of a talking shop and a framework, but not very much action.
Rubbish question. So I was thinking, what's my question going to be? I had a completely different question. And then yesterday, Sarah on Discord asked, what happens to a skip once it's collected? And I currently have some housework going on. I have 2 skips on my driveway. So I was very excited to answer this. I thought, actually, that's a great question.
Okay, so this is more investigative journalism.
Yeah, this is where I got really investigative.
Okay,
so,
at its finest.
First thing I did was I called the skip company because their mobile number was on the side of the skip. Now, that is pretty easy investigative journalism.
Wow, you've really pushed the boat out here. You've stretched yourself, James.
Yep. So I found the mobile number printed on the side of a skip. I gave the guy a call. He said, the skip I have is for a company called Wilson's. And he said, I send all of it to Abacus. So then I phoned...
Oh, yes, I've seen the name Abacus.
Have you?
Okay. Yeah, I know.
So I phoned Abacus. So thank you to Simon from Abacus. I mean, but I spent like an hour on this yesterday just speaking to all these skip companies. And I really appreciate the time you gave me answering my questions. Abacus said they have roughly 150 loads arriving a day, which could be as much as 1,500 tonnes coming in from various skips across the city. What they do is they tip the skips and they have 3 grabbers, so 3, big...
articulated arms or
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly, those kind of things, just picking out waste they're looking for. So people are operating out going, there's some plasterboard, we'll grab that. And they're basically sorting it into piles. And the piles then go onto a conveyor belt, which are then manually checked, so pulling out anything that the grabber accidentally got. Now, it's worth noting they were like, actually, for large construction sites, obviously we don't have to do this because they'll have a plasterboard skip, a timber skip, a green waste skip. So they will have specific skips for materials. But for like my house, where they're mixing everything together, they need to sort it.
I do always wonder about this. You know, you see those mixed, DIY skips all the time on the road. So this is what they're saying. They're sorting it with these grabbers.
Exactly. And he was saying, actually, it's pretty predictable. When people are doing renovation work, we know roughly what to expect that's coming in. But he did say it's a bit hit and miss as to whether they make money on it. It's a bit like Russian roulette. What is someone sending you? Will you make money on it? And some skips they make money on and some skips they lose money on.
Okay, and do you know what they're after to make the money? Decent wood.
Yeah, wood, plasterboard I think is valuable. Metals be good. Yeah, so the things so basically he went through all the different materials. So plasterboard is sent for recycling. Green stuff is sent for composting. Timber, he said, was turned into pellets for incineration. Now, I think they were classing that as recycling, which I think legally it probably is. But, I mean, it's just incineration with an extra step.
Yeah, it's fuel.
They send the stones to be made into aggregate. Soil is sent off to fill excavation sites or used as topsoil. The metal's recycled. Most plastic is incinerated, interestingly, because most of it's film and heavily contaminated from the construction industry.
Yeah, it's quite low quality, isn't it?
Yeah, fabrics have persistent organic pollutants in, otherwise known as POPs. We're going to do a separate episode on that. So basically, fabrics are sent off for incineration. And what's left over is called fines, and that is sent to landfill and used to kind of separate layers of landfill. And again, we're going to do an episode on landfill to explain that a bit more. But basically, they went through all the materials and said, this is what we get from construction, and we can do something with most of it. And they said to me that they had something like 5 to 10% going off to incineration, with the rest having a purpose. Recycling or compost.
Okay, that's pretty good.
I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, so you can definitely have faith in that mixed skip isn't just going to all get tipped into a landfill site.
Yeah, if it's true, it's incredible. So construction, is a very high resource use process, but I was encouraged that maybe 90% of the stuff coming out of my house is getting recycled, and I was pleasantly surprised. Now, I responded to Sarah to say, thanks, Sarah, I've just spent an hour on the phone with the tip companies getting information on how skips work. And she did say her husband wishes her happy bin day every Tuesday. Happy bin day, everyone. But skip lifting day is more exciting than Christmas. So
the skip people are here. The skip people are here.
Isn't that just such a great summary of our lovely listeners? So thank you so much, Sarah, for writing in and responding to my comment. I really appreciate it. Residual rubbish. So this is our final feature, our new feature, but our final part of the episode where we talk about things that have made us laugh or cry. Now, last week I just said laugh, but this week I have one that made me cry.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so we've got to update this feature. Someone shared something on LinkedIn that I just could not believe existed, and I just have to mention on this podcast.
Yeah.
It was a tongue cover for children so that they don't taste bitter medicine.
I saw this too.
Oh my
How
God.
ridiculous.
It was like a plastic like a plastic tongue-shaped thing.
Sheet, like a bag type thing, mini bag.
You just put your tongue on it and then you don't taste bitter medicine. Oh my God.
Are we sure this is a real thing?
Well, I thought it was a joke, so I then went to the website and I translated it, and it is sold in Southeast Asia. It's a bestseller.
Oh my God.
At this point, it only had 12 5-star reviews, but it did have 5-star reviews, no 1-star reviews. It was 67 Thai baht for 5 of them, which I think is about £1.52. So at the time of recording, this is not cheap.
Wow.
That's like, what's that?
30, 40p.
Yeah, 30p a unit. So pretty expensive stuff, I think, for a little plastic bag that goes over your tongue. But can we not just all cope with bitter medicine? I was dismayed to see this existed.
What do we need to do? We need to write to the medicine companies, do we, to say, put a bit more sugar in?
Well, they don't sell this in the UK, but what would this be on the Ram Robbie?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, it would be a very, very bright red.
There you go.
Can we start a petition on that, James?
I've got too many petitions.
Global petition.
Yeah.
Okay, but I had one that made me smile.
Great. Let's bring us up for the end.
Yeah, this one's been floating around on the internet for a couple of months, but it's sort of come to the UK as a story. It's a guy in Australia who bought a house, well, at least a down payment on a house, through just collecting cans in New South Wales, Australia. So this guy, Damien Gordon, he collected over 450,000 cans over 7 years and managed to get enough money to put a down payment down and secure himself a house off the back of it. He's actually a musician who helped to set up a festival, and by the sounds of it, he ended up spending more time on the clean-up at the festival than actually performing. So I'm not sure whether he's still a musician. And he came up with this idea after one of the first festivals. He wasn't just combing the streets for cans. He actually set up cleanups at events and festivals, and people started contacting him directly to say, will you take all my cans away, and therefore claim the very small few cents deposit, but it all adds up. And it obviously adds up if you manage to buy a house with it. And he said, and this is a quote, people began contacting me with their upcoming events. I'm getting married in the park. Would you like to tackle the recycling for us? There was another one that was, it's my daughter's birthday down the beach. Will you come and collect the bottles? It was amazing. So this guy's really really made a name for himself on the internet, and I'm just wondering who's going to be the UK version of Damien when we get DRS coming in the UK in 2027. There's already an organisation set up to run it, but if you are that person thinking you're going to hope to buy a house off the back of these bottle deposits and can deposits, remember it did take him 7 years, so it's going to be 2034 at the earliest before you can make that down payment.
Such a great story. I love it. Well done, Damien. And as always, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for the reviews and engagement. We love getting the opportunity to do this podcast and speak to all of you. You can use the links in our show notes to join our Discord. Follow us on social media at Rubbish Podcast. You can email talkingrubbishpodcast@gmail.com, or you can WhatsApp us. All the details are in our show notes, and everything we have discussed today can be found on our link tree. All that's left for me to say is see you next week. Bye.
Bye.